Once upon a time there was a man. His name was Moses. Moses was hiding in the desert tending flocks because he had killed another man. He was fleeing from justice. But then one day in the desert, Moses came across a bush that was burning and never stopped burning. And that bush was in fact God, who had made himself visible to Moses in this way on purpose to reveal to Moses his nature. Because just like this bush burns on its own and never burns up, so God is completely all-sufficient within himself. God does not need anybody. God does not need anything. He is completely self-sufficient. Now God speaks to Moses from the burning bush and tells Moses that he must go to Egypt and bring his people back, God's people, the children of Israel. Moses is to save them from the most powerful nation on earth. And if you think about it from a human perspective, from Moses' perspective, it was mission impossible. It was a gigantic assignment. And how does Moses respond when God asks him to do this? He responds with this question. He says to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" If I may paraphrase that, Moses is saying to God, in other words, God, I'm nobody. You should get yourself a somebody. You know that I failed. You know I'm inadequate. I'm slow of speech and tongue. I'm not eloquent. Why do you want to use me? Who am I? Now God's response to that is profound. His response to that is simply this. He says to Moses, I will be with you. Again, if I may paraphrase this, God is saying to Moses, look, Moses, I am all sufficient. In other words, I don't need your success. I don't need your adequacy. I don't need a somebody. I can fulfill all my purposes with a complete nobody. I choose to use you, Moses, not because I need you, but because I want you. My glory, Moses, is most powerfully displayed in your nobodiness. My power is made perfect in your weakness, to quote the Apostle Paul. What is required from you, Moses, is not excellence and ability. What is required from you at this point is faith in me and obedience to my instruction. Now, the interesting thing to me is that despite the burning bush and the context, Moses continues to fail to understand, because we read in the very next chapter, Exodus 4, he says this to God, Moses now, pardon your servant, Lord. I've never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. And so God says to him, and I think it's out of frustration, God says, who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say. But Moses still doesn't get it. Moses says to God, pardon your servant, Lord, please. Send someone else. In other words, Moses refuses to go because he's still measuring success on his own ability, not God's ability. He's not moving in faith. He's missing the symbolism of God's all-sufficiency burning in front of his very eyes. And so Moses' spiritual dullness and lack of faith at this point angers God. I know this because the Bible records that God became angry at this point. Yet God, being gracious even in the face of Moses' unbelief, gives Moses a plan B. His brother Aaron is to help him with the speaking. But the point is this that you must get from the text, that Moses could have done all of this without Aaron because he had God with him. He had the person who had spoken the universe into place with his own tongue, with his own words. God, he had him with him. He didn't need anybody else. But Moses could just not grasp that. Now, please reflect with me on all of what I've just said, and I want to highlight two things. Firstly, it may be so that you have failed miserably in life. It may be a fact. And it may be so that, humanly speaking, you are fiercely inadequate when compared to others. But if God calls you to do His work and He goes with you, you must agree that your failure and your inadequacy up to that point is quite irrelevant. The question then is not, who am I? Instead, the question is, who is God? The question is not, am I going? The question is God going? Is God going? May we grasp that when God is with a nobody, absolutely everything is possible. And may we grasp that when God is with a nobody, that nobody becomes a somebody because of Him. Secondly, you may look into the mirror today and think, I am a somebody. You're sort of finding it difficult to connect with Moses and his nobodiness. So you look into the mirror and you think, I am a somebody. You're not plagued by nobody thoughts like Moses was because of any perceived failure or inadequacy on your part. You do not cry out to God, who am I? You just sort of think to yourself in your life, I'm okay all around. I'm adequate sufficiently. If so, you must please check your heart today. If there is any inkling in you that you are your own burning bush or a smaller burning bush, that you are within yourself sufficient and worthy of God's calling, well, then that is a very dangerous place to be. Any sense of self-sufficiency is dangerous, and you must please check for pride. Paul said in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 9 to 10, therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then I am content with my weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. For when I am weak, then I am strong. A nobody only becomes a spiritual somebody when God is with them. And nobody becomes a spiritual somebody when they rely on the sufficiency of God and not their own sufficiency. I close. All that is required of you in your journey with Christ is your humble faith in His sufficiency and your obedience to Him, which is your act of love. What is not required is your qualifications, your excellence, and your adequacy. God is all sufficient. Christ is all sufficient. That is why we as a congregation sing with CityAlight these words that they wrote about the sufficiency of Christ, our eternal burning bush. They wrote and we sing, what gift of grace is Jesus my Redeemer? There is no more for heaven now to give. He is my joy, my righteousness and freedom, my steadfast love, my deep and boundless peace. To this I hold, my hope is only Jesus, for my life is wholly bound to His. Oh, how strange and divine, I can sing, all is mine, yet not I, but through Christ in me. It is in the humble journey with Christ that what was inadequate becomes adequate, and what was failure becomes success. May God bless you in your journey with Him, and may you revel, enjoy the complete all-sufficiency of God, of Christ, of the Spirit. Amen.